honored to have Jessica Oreck, the director, here. So, just to kind of start the conversation a little bit, I know this film kind of started based on the idea of mushroom hunting, and just kind of talk about how it started from that kind of little kernel to what it became to this kind of multi-layered essay film about lots of stuff.
Yeah. Well, this was a question you had asked earlier, so I feel like I really owe it to you. I make films about ethnobiology, the way that cultures interact with the natural world. And I was looking for a film to follow up my first film called Beetle Queen Conquers Tokyo, which was a very specific cultural phenomenon of bug collecting in Japan. And I thought, I want another project like that, where I pick something very specific and then I explore the culture through that phenomenon. And so I picked mushroom collecting in Eastern Europe, mostly because I had a degree in mycology and they love mushroom collecting in Eastern Europe, so I thought that was a good fit. But my first trip to Eastern Europe, I was in Romania, and Andrei Codrescu, who's a friend of mine, had set me up with a bunch of poets in Romania. And I spent the first couple weeks wandering through the forest with them, and collecting mushrooms and cooking mushrooms, and mostly talking about, it was a lot of culture and a lot of art and a lot of poetry, but it was also about what it was like under the reign of Ceausescu and how during that time they would go to the forest to collect mushrooms, not because they loved the mushrooms so much, but because that was the way that they could talk. That was the way they could be themselves and sort of express themselves and have these conversations that were political, but also just about art. And that, to me, became so much more interesting than just the mushroom collecting on its own. So that's sort of how the focus of the film shifted. And so after that trip, I just dove into research and read everything I could get my hands on about mythology and about sort of the way that we assign memory to physical places, and just everything. It ran the gamut. It was many, many books and many years of research. That's sort of just layered together with our experience in Eastern Europe. We went back again to Poland, Russia, and Ukraine, and sort of built this crazy stew of a movie. So I don't know if that answers your question, but sort of, maybe.
So you started filming this 6 or 7 years ago, is that right?
2009 was when we started filming.
So how has your relationship to the material and the places and the footage changed? And the film was completed a couple years ago, so even since then it's probably changed a little bit.
I haven't watched it since I finished it, so I don't know now what it's like, but definitely over the course of editing, which took 5 years, the animation itself was hand-painted by an illustrator that I worked very closely with, and then scanned in many layers into Photoshop, and then cut out by very dedicated interns, and then animated in a three-dimensional space in After Effects. So that process alone took 2 years, during which time I moved to the Arctic and made a different movie, because I just couldn't stand the waiting. But that was, it changed a lot. It's impossible for me to say. My process is very intuitive, which I know is really unhip and not very helpful to say. But it's, especially with this film, which was so much about liminal spaces and sort of tapping into something that isn't fully conscious, I would spend a lot of time editing slightly drunk, or when I was, I would bring my editing setup to bed, and I would set my alarm to wake up in the middle of the night, and I would edit for a little bit, and then let myself fall back asleep, and then wake up again and edit for a little bit, because I have a very strong voice in my head. It's a lady. She's really annoying. She tells me that I'm not good at anything, and it's a really good way to turn her off when you're really sleepy or slightly drunk. So that's what I found was very helpful.
So the cinematography in this film is beautiful.
Yeah.
I know you shot on 16?
We shot on Super 16, yeah.
And you had the cinematographer Sean Price Williams, who's worked on a number of amazing films. Most recently, Heaven Knows What, and and Robert Greene's newest movie.
Kate Plays Christine.
Kate
Yeah.
Plays Christine.
And Iris, the
right.
animated movie that just came out.
How did you start working with him?
I started dating him first. He and I were together for 9 years. I was 19 when I met him. He was a older, very cool video store clerk at the time. Yeah, and so we started dating, and it was actually really lucky. He had never shot anything sort of professionally, and I had never made a movie. And it was like, we were just like, hey, let's go to Japan and make a movie. And we did, and it actually was successful, which was a miracle. And yeah, so that was sort of how our relationship got, I mean, that's how our working relationship got started. But then he shot this movie, and then we broke up. But we're still on very good terms. He's also going to shoot my next movie. It's working with him is really amazing. He is a challenging person, but he's crazy talented, and he has really his own vision. A lot of this film, I think of this film much more as a collaboration with him than me directing and him being the DP, because he really, a lot of the film was us fighting, and then him being like, I'm just going to do my own thing. All right, fine. And then we would, because I was recording sound, so I would sort of go off in one direction, and he would go off in another direction, and then we'd get back together, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I got this thing. And he'd be like, oh, I got this thing. It was so amazing. And then it was all fine. So we have a great working relationship that way, I think. And I think it really, I think his work makes my films better. So I appreciate that.
Speaking of sound, you mentioned earlier today that you're not a big fan of sync sound.
Yeah.
And that's very evident.
Yeah.
So what is kind of your methodology when kind of developing a soundscape for the images that you capture?
Well, like I was saying, I mean, most of the time I wasn't actually recording what Sean was shooting. So I would sort of go off and do my own thing. And I don't think I have synesthesia, but I do think of sounds in terms of food. I don't really know how that came about, but I would go somewhere and I'd be like, oh man, this is like great chocolate mint chip ice cream. And then I'd go back to the footage and I'd be like, chocolate mint chip ice cream, right here. This is the spot. No, it wasn't quite that random, but it was, it's much more of a feeling than I can put my finger on. I have a lot of ideas while I'm editing, and they slowly sort of fall apart as things tell me what, I don't know, this makes me sound like I'm a crazy person. I'm sorry, I also just like had speed sushi and wine, so I now am a little bit addled. But it is sort of like a crazy person, because I don't feel like this movie really has anything to do with me. It's just like I'm channeling something else. And a lot of times the channeling's really hard, but it's still like I don't know, like there's some greater muse that's like, yeah, you should look at this part of yourself, because this part's pretty fucked up. And maybe you should make a movie about how you feel about that part. And then this movie comes out. Yeah.
Does anyone have any specific questions?
I swear I'm not as crazy as I seem right now.
There are some really beautiful lines and stanzas. Who wrote the narrative, or how did that come about?
I wrote the narration and the fairy tale. It was a process of sort of digesting hundreds of books about Eastern Europe and about sort of human psychology, and then turning it into something that would fit with the film, and that was, I mean, I was saying this earlier, it's not purposefully obtuse, but layered enough that it isn't telling anyone what to think. I really don't like movies that tell me how to feel or how to think. I'm very contrarian, so that's very important to me, that there are always levels of interpretation layered into everything. And I feel like, I mean, the original text I wrote was 30 pages, and it ended up being less than a page and a half. So each text, each little section has pages and pages and pages of sort of breaking each idea down. But I wanted to pack as much of it in as I could without making it too explicit.
There's another question over here.
I wondered, was language a problem in working with all these people? Because they seem to be very comfortable with the film.
Yeah. Language to me is never a problem. I don't speak any languages well, and definitely nothing more than English ever. And I love being around people that I can't understand. And I think that it gives a layer of privacy to the people we're around, which is really nice for them, but for me it's also a way to sort of bypass the small talk of being in a social context that is totally contrived. And you get to sort of skip all of that and just be humans together. And I think that that's a really magical way of being in the world. I love being at a table with people that don't speak English and just sort of getting to absorb the vibe. So yeah, I've never made a film in a place that speaks English, and I hope that continues because I like it a lot.
The scenes with the dilapidated buildings, was that the Chernobyl site? Or?
Yeah, so that's the town of Pripyat, which was the town that was evacuated 4 days after the Chernobyl disaster. And it was really a powerful experience to go there. We hired a tour guide and we went, and he was very serious. He had a Geiger counter and he was like, you step where I step, don't put the camera gear down, don't put anything down, like just follow me. And sure enough, he would just move the Geiger counter off this little path that he had cleared and it would just go crazy. And so we just, stayed on this little path and had this crazy experience. And then about a year after we got back, there was an announcement, I think in the Times, about how they were opening Chernobyl to tours. We're like, well, so what? Wait a second. So I guess what we did had nothing to do with being legal, but it was still powerful. So, yeah.
So, a couple of years ago, after this film came out, you kind of came out and said that you were kind of maybe done making films for a while.
Yeah.
And you've been kind of working on some shorts. I know you did this project called Mysteries of Vernacular, or Vernacular, which is a web series. If you haven't heard of it, you should go online and watch them. They're little short pieces about specific words and kind of the history of them, right?
Fizzle. Fizzle, for instance.
Fizzle, yeah, so you've seen one. Yeah.
So you're kind of hinting that you're actually going to be making a new film.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I make a lot of short animated content. Mysteries of Vernacular was just one of many series that I've now made. I ended up working for a children's network, which has since fizzled. So I made many series and invested a huge amount of time and love and energy into this network that doesn't seem to exist. So that was a great disappointment. But I have a new series that I'm really hoping to sell. Everybody fingers crossed, please. Within the next week, we'll see. And I'm hoping to make another feature. But I don't know. It's a different. The film world changes really fast, and it's very fickle. So I sort of have to start over, start fresh, and it's a bigger film than I've ever made before. It's not just going to be Sean and I sort of out in the world doing our thing. We'll need more people, and it's a little bit different than this. It's a how have I been describing it? A historical, epic, war, romance, science fiction documentary. So it's really easy. It's an easy one to sell. Definitely, if you're an investor, we should talk about it. Yeah, but it's going to be awesome if I make it, and Sean will shoot it, and it's going to take place in Russia, and it's going to be wild and cool and devastating. But yeah, also impossible to raise money for. So it may just be an idea that does its own thing.
We'll see.
Yeah, hopefully, maybe someday.
Well, do we have any more questions?
What was the budget for this film?
You know, I don't actually know. I'm really bad. I mean, Jordan can tell you, I'm just like the most disorganized person. If I don't have someone telling me where I need to be exactly at a particular time, I just forget. So the budget got very out of hand because I have no idea what it was. But we made, a lot of it was from grants. A lot of it was from the money I made on my first couple features. And then we also had investors who will never make their money back. Guys. But they were okay with that. They knew that going in. It was more of a gift than anything. Yeah. So, but I couldn't tell you. I couldn't give you a number or even a rough estimate, honestly. I'm very bad at numbers. That was the other thing we talked about, was just that I can't retain things. It's like my brain is just a sieve. It goes in and it doesn't even, it's like it doesn't even get to fall out the outside. It just falls out the same side that it came in. Yeah, I'm bad.
Oh,
Yeah.
just a quick question about the narration. Since Eastern Europe's a pretty big region with several different languages, was all the narration in one language, or?
Yeah, so I chose, I had started in Romania and Hungary, and then as I started reading more about folklore, I realized that Baba Yaga was the witch that I had to focus on, and her tale was the tale I needed to tell, because she is this amazing character. I mean, first of all, she's the first reference that they've ever found to a witch in written folklore. So she is the basis of all of the witches that we hear about in contemporary folklore. But she also is this amazing, ambiguous entity that represents so much. I mean, she's not, in most tales, she's not all the way female, but not really male. She's not all the way nature, not all the way culture. She's not, sometimes she's not even all the way human. She's part, metal. Even her hut, is not animate, not inanimate. It's both things. She represents all of these dichotomies, and just, she's never all the way good and definitely not all the way evil. She's got just this strange, very human way of being not black and white. So it was important that she was the main character, and since she comes from a Slavic root, I decided that Slavic languages were what I was going to focus on. So after Romania and Hungary, I ended up going back, like I said, to Poland, Russia, Ukraine. Because I wanted, the way that Slavic languages, so vernaculars and etymologies are sort of linguistics are a little bit of a hobby of mine, and the way that Slavic languages are constructed is so fluid, and the way that they understand each other and the way that they influence each other, and the way that those cultures, the way the boundaries have been redrawn, and that these cultures have layered on top of each other and shine through each other and almost function as a palimpsest, is so fascinating to me. And it's such a presence there. They really carry their history with them in a very physical way. And so, I don't remember where I was going with that. Something about, yeah, so I chose those, that's why I picked that little group, I guess. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, well, so
Well, it's just separate languages,
Baba Yaga
which
part.
is,
So the fairy tale is in Russian,
Okay.
and then the voiceover, the narration, the male narration is in Polish.
Oh.
Sorry, that would have been a much simpler answer.
No, I like the journey. It's probably more interesting to everybody not super into languages.
yeah.
I was just curious, when did you have the 30 pages of text? At what point?
Yeah, so we shot in 2009 and 2010, and then I started editing in 2010, and then I took a year and a half and moved to the Arctic, and then I came back and edited for a year and a half. So I must have started writing at some point in 2010 and sort of taken a break, but definitely that last year and a half that I was editing, I was just slowly building this. I was editing scenes at the same time that I was writing, and it was slowly building up and then just chopping away as the scenes would sort of get shorter and tighten into their own little packets of whatever the heck they are. Yeah, I don't know, it's hard for me to say. It's been a long time, and like I said, it's all coming out this year. So I don't, I don't know. I could look back at my computer and look at the longest one and find out, but I don't know what it would be. Somewhere probably in 2012.
So you went shooting mushrooms and sort of everything else, and were reading at the same time.
Mhm.
And then it was in the editing process that you wrote the 30 pages and started editing.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
could you make a whole new movie out of the footage you have, going a totally different direction?
We don't, because we shot on film, we don't have that much more footage. I think it was only about 14 hours, which is, for a documentary, very little. But definitely, I mean, this film could be, I mean, if you look at the early cuts of this film, it's a different film. There could be lots of different versions of this. And I love that about it. I love that it's sort of modular and I mean, this to me is definitely the final version, but I love that somebody else could come in and take this footage and make something totally different. That. What was it?
The outtakes.
The outtakes, yeah. It's, I don't know, I like how personal things are, and that I made a movie about humanity, but really it was about me, and that any movie that anybody makes is really gonna be about themselves and their own insecurities and their own flaws. I think that's a nice way of looking at art.
Is that why you can't go back and watch it?
I have a hard time watching it with audiences because it's really hard not to take. Like, every time somebody shifts in their seat, I'm like, oh my god, they hate the movie. They hate the movie. This is the worst. So and God forbid somebody checks their phone or something. So it's better if I just don't, because I end up being so insecure.
Totally understandable. Well, anyone have a last question?
Oh yeah, I love the score. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the score was amazing. I also love the score. I feel like I can say these things because I didn't really have anything to do with making it. Like, yeah, the cinematography was amazing, wasn't it? That's not me being conceited. That's me being like, I had nothing to do with it. I'm so glad. Yeah, the score is amazing. So it's a mix of licensed music, Russian and Polish, from the 60s and 70s and 80s. And then also this guy, Paul Grimstad, who I'd worked with a couple of times. And I don't know, I handed him 1,000 songs. And I was like, this is the atmosphere that I want. And then I would hand him specific songs and be like, this is the scene, this is what I want it to sort of be like, but take some of this atmosphere from some of these other things. And he would create something. And about halfway through, there was one point where I said, okay, so at 45 seconds into the song, there's this one note that goes up a little bit. I need you to bring that up just like 3 decibels. And he was like, that's it. I'm gonna hand you all of the pieces of these pieces of music and you can do it yourself. It's like, okay, so we ended up actually developing a really great system where he would send me a piece of music and then send me all the sort of Legos, all the different, the bass line and the drums, and I mean, it wasn't that simple, but because it's all electronic, but he would send me all the different pieces and then I could sort of build them the way I wanted to. And that was the perfect way to work. And so now, since then, that's the way we've done everything, and it's great. And then also there was a Japanese artist who had made music for my first film and had made music for the second film, which didn't end up in the second film, but ended up in this film, weirdly. I don't know how Arctic Reindeer herding music ends up in this film, but it worked much better in this one than it did in the last one. So, yeah. But I was really blessed to work with both of those guys. They're both amazing. So, and also the licensing of those tracks was great. Yeah.
I'm curious, have you ever shown the film to any of the places where you shot on site, and what kind of reactions did you get?
Yeah, we showed it last year. We showed it in Poland and Russia. And it was, not to brag, but it was one of the best experiences of my life. Because they just loved it a lot. And it was, my favorite compliment to get is afterwards, people being like, wow, I thought you were an old Eastern European guy. Or in the case of my first film, I thought you were an old Japanese guy. Or in the case of my second film, I thought you were an old Finnish guy. I don't know why I always have to be a man, but somehow I am. But yeah, and they all, in Russia especially, they were just like, wow, how are you not Eastern? Like, how are you not Slavic? Because you represented our soul so so well. And it was awesome. They mobbed me after the screening. It was like, I felt like such a rock star. It was so cool. Yeah, it was really good screenings in both places, so I was very grateful for that.
Thank you so much. A quick announcement, the security people left, so everyone has to leave out the offices, not the front door.
Yeah, so unfortunately there won't be any Washington Street exits, but we can have people come through the Main Street exit, which I apologize about, unfortunately.